Looking back at the flashing red and blue lights bouncing off the vinyl siding of my house, I genuinely thought that was rock bottom. Picture it. 3 patrol cars screeching to a halt on a quiet Tuesday evening, the air thick with the smell of exhaust and suburban panic, and my 16-year-old son, Ethan, standing there in his flannel pajamas, holding a laptop like it was a loaded weapon. My neighbor, Patricia Vance, the self-appointed queen of our homeowners association, was screaming at a bewildered police officer that my son was a cyber terrorist actively dismantling the fabric of American democracy. And why? Because the kid, in a moment of teenage boredom, had changed our Wi-Fi name. But here's the thing, and I need you to really hear me on this. That moment wasn't rock bottom. It wasn't even the prologue to the real nightmare. What we found in Patricia's basement 3 weeks later didn't just expose a petty neighborhood tyrant. It uncovered a multi-million-dollar criminal empire that would land her in federal prison and turn our sleepy little cul-de-sac into a national news headline. But before the FBI raids and the SWAT teams, let me take you back to how a single dad and his coding whiz son accidentally declared war on a cartel boss masquerading as a suburban mom. My name is Lucas Miller, and 3 years ago, I was just a guy trying to glue his life back together. After a brutal divorce where my ex-wife cleaned out our joint accounts and ran off to Bali with her yoga instructor, I needed stability. I needed a fortress. Oak Creek Sanctuary seemed like the answer to a prayer I hadn't realized I was praying. It was picture perfect. Manicured lawns that looked like green velvet, white picket fences that gleamed under the sun, and an HOA fee of $250 that promised to keep the chaos of the outside world at bay. The realtors sold me on the peace and quiet, mentioning that the HOA president, Patricia Vance, was a meticulous former auditor who ran a tight ship. That should have been the first siren blaring in my head, because meticulous is usually code for will measure your grass with a ruler. For the first year, things were okay. I'm a union electrician, used to hard work, pulling double shifts, crawling through attics filled with insulation and rat droppings just to keep the lights on for my boy. Ethan is the kind of kid who speaks Python better than English, a quiet genius who spends his nights building servers out of scrap parts. We kept to ourselves. Patricia would drive by in her pristine silver Mercedes, wave with that tight, practiced smile, and maybe make a passive-aggressive comment about my work truck being an eyesore, but it was manageable. Then came the election. Patricia ran unopposed, naturally, and the moment she seized total control, the atmosphere in Oak Creek shifted. It felt heavy, like the drop in barometric pressure before a tornado. The fines started arriving like clockwork. My mailbox became a slot machine of misery. Commercial vehicle visible from the street? $500 fine. Basketball hoop in the driveway? $500 fine. Non-conforming landscaping because I planted a few tomatoes? Another $500. I was bleeding money, working myself to the bone, tasting the copper tang of exhaustion every single day, just to pay for the privilege of living in my own house. But the declaration of war arrived via certified mail. It was a cease and desist order on official Oak Creek letterhead, demanding I immediately stop broadcasting offensive digital signals. Ethan, bless his heart, had upgraded our home network to a mesh system for better coverage and named it NSA Listening Post Number 4. It was a joke, a classic bit of teenage humor. Patricia didn't laugh. She saw it as a direct challenge to her authority. I remember crumbling that letter in my grease-stained hands and tossing it into the trash. This is America, I told Ethan. We can name our internet whatever the hell we want. That was my mistake, assuming we were playing by the rules of a civil society. Patricia wasn't playing a game. She was running an operation. She called the cops, citing an ancient city ordinance about electronic harassment meant for dial-up stalkers in the 90s. Poor Officer Bennett looked like he wanted to be anywhere else as he explained that, technically, he had to investigate the complaint. It was absurd, laughable even. But looking back, that complaint wasn't about her being offended. It was a probe. She was testing our defenses, seeing how much heat we could take, because Patricia Vance had a secret, and we were unknowingly standing right on top of it. 72 hours later, she called an emergency board meeting. Number 48-hour notice. Just a sudden ambush at the freezing cold community center that smelled of stale donuts and floor wax. She sat at the head of the table, flanked by her sycophants, looking for all the world like a dictator in a tailor's suit. She rammed through the digital harmony resolution, giving the HOA the power to inspect and regulate all wireless signals in the neighborhood to prevent cyber terrorism. It passed 4-1. The only dissenting vote was Mrs. Gable, an 80-year-old woman who thought Wi-Fi was a type of frozen yogurt. I tried to fight it. I pulled the bylaws, channeling every ounce of my frustration into finding a loophole. I found one. Emergency meetings require an actual emergency, like a fire or a flood, not hurt feelings over a Wi-Fi name. I filed a challenge with the state attorney general. Ethan, meanwhile, decided to fight fire with napalm. He renamed the network. Patricia drinks boxed wine alone. The neighborhood exploded. Suddenly, everyone was in on it. Networks popped up everywhere. Free the Miller family, HOA Dictator Watch, and my favorite from our Russian neighbors, the Petrovs. In Soviet Union, HOA pays you. Patricia lost her composure. She hired a private investigator, a sweaty guy in a beat-up Ford Taurus who followed me to job sites, probably trying to prove I was doing unlicensed work or some nonsense. But then, she got greedy. Desperation makes people sloppy. I installed security cameras, cheap ones, just to be safe, and at 11:42 p.m. on a Tuesday, I caught her. The footage was crystal clear in glorious high-definition night vision. Patricia Vance, crawling through my azalea bushes in a silk robe and rubber boots, trying to pick the lock on my external electrical meter. When I confronted her the next morning, handing her a printed screenshot of her criminal trespassing, she didn't even blink. Routine safety inspection, she hissed, her eyes dead and cold like a shark's. Your background as an electrician makes you a high-risk liability for code violations. I laughed in her face, telling her I'd already sent the footage to the police and my lawyer. That was the first time I saw fear flicker behind her designer sunglasses. But it was strange. She wasn't just trying to break in. She knew exactly where the meter was, and she was looking at the ground near the foundation, scanning it like she was searching for buried treasure. The retaliation was nuclear. Patricia didn't just want to find me. She wanted to erase me. It started with the state licensing board. She filed a report claiming I was performing dangerous, unlicensed electrical work, which is rich considering I'm a master electrician with a spotless record. Suddenly, I had inspectors crawling over my job sites, halting work, costing me thousands in delays. Then she went for the jugular, my business loans. She used her old banking connections to whisper poison into the ears of the loan officers at Liberty Savings. They called my business line of credit due immediately. $50,000, due in 72 hours, or I'd lose everything. But the lowest blow, the one that still makes my blood boil when I think about it, was the call to Child Protective Services. A caseworker showed up at my door, looking grim, holding a file thick with fabricated lies. That I was exposing Ethan to dangerous criminal elements. That our home was a cyber terrorism training camp. It was sickening. Thankfully, the caseworker had eyes. She saw a clean home, a brilliant kid doing advanced coding homework, and a father who clearly loved his son. She marked the report as unfounded, but the damage was done. I was shaking with rage. I wanted to storm over to Patricia's house and tear it down brick by brick. "Dad, stop," Ethan said, pulling me back from the edge. "Bullies win when you lose your cool. We don't get mad. We get data." That night, my 16-year-old son went to war. He set up what he called a digital honeypot. If Patricia wanted to play cyber games, he was going to show her why you don't mess with a kid who dreams in binary. It didn't take long. Patricia, desperate to delete the evidence of her harassment, tried to hack into Ethan's server. Big mistake. She essentially left her front door wide open. Ethan didn't just block her. He traced the intrusion back to her source IP and gained access to her network traffic logs. "Dad, you need to hear this," Ethan whispered a few nights later, his face pale in the glow of his monitors. He played an audio file. It was Patricia, but her voice was different, frantic, terrified. She was speaking to someone with a heavy, thick accent, maybe Eastern European. "The electrician is a problem. He's blocking the access point. If he digs in the backyard, he'll find the junction. We need him gone. Now." The other voice just grunted. "Liquidate him if necessary. The operation cannot stop. Liquidate." My stomach dropped through the floor. This wasn't about grass height anymore. I called Sarah Jenkins, an investigative reporter for Channel 8 who had done a piece on contractor fraud a few years back. She was tough as nails and smelled the story immediately. She started digging into Patricia's past. Turns out, our meticulous HOA president had moved 3 times in 10 years, always to neighborhoods with a specific geographical layout, always becoming HOA president, and always buying up foreclosed homes through shell companies. She's not a real estate investor, Lucas, Sarah told me over lukewarm coffee at my kitchen table. She's a ghost. But look at this. Sarah pulled out a map from the 1920s, a Prohibition-era blueprint of the city. Oak Creek Sanctuary was built right on top of the old bootlegging routes. There were tunnels, miles of them, sealed up and forgotten, or so we thought. Ethan overlaid the heat signatures from the city's power grid data he'd scraped. The tunnels weren't empty. They were glowing hot. Look at the power consumption, Ethan pointed out, tracing a line that ran directly from Patricia's basement under the Petrov's house and straight toward my foundation. She's pulling megawatt levels of power. That's not a space heater. That's industrial. We put the pieces together, and the picture was terrifying. Patricia had reopened the Prohibition tunnels. She was using them to tap directly into the neighborhood's main power lines, stealing electricity from every home in Oak Creek to run a massive operation underground. That's why she was trying to break into my meter. My house sat directly over a crucial junction box where the power feed split. I wasn't just an annoying neighbor. I was physically blocking the artery of her criminal enterprise. We thought it was Bitcoin mining. It made sense. The heat, the power theft, the servers. But then Ethan found the chemical signatures on the thermal exhaust vents near the creek bed. Dad, crypto miners don't emit chemical fumes, he said, his voice trembling. We weren't dealing with white-collar crypto brothers. We were sitting on top of a subterranean synthetic drug lab. The servers were partly a cover, partly a money laundering mechanism for a massive narcotics manufacturing plant running beneath our feet. Patricia Vance was the logistics manager for a cartel cell operating out of suburbia. We went to the FBI. Agent Caldwell from the Organized Crime Task Force looked at Ethan's data, looked at Sarah's research, and then looked at me. Mr. Miller, he said, we've been chasing this power signature for 2 years. We thought it was an industrial park. We never suspected a cul-de-sac. The plan was terrifyingly simple. We had to act defeated. I had to let Patricia think she had won, to lower her guard so she would access the main tunnel entrance in her basement, leading the feds right to the heart of the lab. But Patricia was paranoid. She sensed the net tightening. In a last-ditch effort to frame me, she had her goons break into my truck at 3 a.m. and plant hard drives full of illegal schematics and drug recipes. She called the cops anonymously, claiming I was the drug kingpin. But she made a fatal error. She showed up while the police were searching my truck, filming with her phone, narrating that she knew I was a criminal. Agent Caldwell, who was monitoring everything via Ethan's hidden cameras, texted me, "Hold steady. Let her talk." When the police found the drives, Patricia smirked. "I told you. He's the one." She didn't know the drives had been wiped and geotagged by the FBI before her goons even stole them from the supply drop the feds had set up as a trap. She had just handled federal evidence. Realizing her frame-up failed, she snapped. The psychology of a narcissist collapsing is a dangerous thing. That night, thermal cameras picked up movement in the tunnels, frantic movement. They were trying to scrub the site. Patricia, in a psychotic break, decided if she couldn't have the operation, no one could. She tried to rig the main gas line running under my house to blow. She was going to incinerate the evidence and my family along with it. "Get out. Now," Agent Caldwell screamed over the phone. I grabbed Ethan, and we ran out into the cool night air just as the SWAT APCs rolled over the perfectly manicured lawns of Oak Creek. The raid was pure chaos. Flashbangs detonated, shattering the suburban silence. Smoke poured from Patricia's basement windows. But she wasn't surrendering. She retreated into the house, dragging her housekeeper, Maria, a sweet woman she had been holding in indentured servitude, as a human shield. "Back off, or she dies." Patricia screamed through a megaphone system she had installed, her voice distorted and demonic. While the hostage negotiator tried to talk her down, Ethan was in the mobile command unit with the FBI. "I can see them," he said, pointing to the thermal scans. "She's not in the living room. She's moving to the pantry. There's a trap door there." The FBI breached the door. Patricia shoved Maria toward the officers and dove into the hidden tunnel entrance. The chase went underground. Agents pursued her through the damp, narrow Prohibition tunnels, past rows of humming servers and vats of chemical precursors. It ended 3 blocks away, at a storm drain exit near the highway. Patricia Vance, the woman who fined me for having the wrong shade of mulch, was dragged out of a sewer grate, covered in sludge, screaming about diplomatic immunity and deep state conspiracies. The news helicopters caught it all. It was the most satisfying image I have ever seen. The fallout was biblical. They seized everything. The tunnel network connected 17 houses, some owned by shell companies, some by innocent neighbors who had no idea they were sleeping on top of a drug highway. Patricia was charged with racketeering, manufacturing controlled substances, kidnapping, attempted murder, and about 50 counts of wire fraud. She's looking at life in federal prison. The crypto money? Seized. The assets? Frozen. The FBI found $12 million in cold wallets on a USB drive sewn into the hem of her curtains. 6 months later, Oak Creek Sanctuary is a different place. The fear is gone. We voted to dissolve the old HOA board. I'm the new president, reluctantly, but my first act was to abolish fines for anything that doesn't involve safety. Maria, the housekeeper, is now a free woman. Her visa fast-tracked thanks to her testimony. She runs a bakery out of her own kitchen now. And Ethan? MIT sent him an acceptance letter that basically said, "Please come here, we saw the news." He's a legend. The kid who brought down a cartel with a Wi-Fi joke. As for me, Sarah Jenkins and I are, well, let's just say we're conducting our own investigations over dinner most nights. But standing here, looking at the peace and quiet of my neighborhood, I have to ask, how many other Patricia Vances are out there? How many petty tyrants are using the veil of community rules to hide something rotten? We trust these institutions. We hand over our rights for the promise of safety and property value. But at what cost? When does enforcing the rules cross the line into oppression? And is it ever morally right to break the law, like hacking a neighbor, to expose a greater evil? I know my answer. I'd do it all again in a heartbeat. Because sometimes, the only way to fix the system is to burn the corruption out from the roots. Let me know in the comments. What's the craziest thing your HOA has ever tried to pull? And do you think Ethan went too far with the hacking? Or was it justified self-defense? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell, because you never know when the next suburban nightmare is going to unfold. Stay safe, and keep your Wi-Fi locked.